Aloha, family of light, and welcome back. Ikoma Mai to You Are Your Own Beloved. Let's assume the position. Take your hand mudra, third eye mudra. Sit with the tall spine. Deep breath in through your nose, relaxing your belly. Pause. Audible exhale for twice as long through your mouth. Pause. Deep breath in. One more time. Breathe naturally. And try to listen and receive my wisdom, my guidance through your heart center, not through your mind. Because the mind wants to judge and the mind wants to do so many things. So try not to listen with the mind, listen with the heart. And I think this is a really important topic because I find that it's so interesting. I find that there's so many people like in the world that, they could be like these brilliant people, like intellectual, brilliant, genius, or spiritually really like in tune and have so many gifts and talents. But yet when it comes to romantic relationships, it's like, forget it. People just, it just seems like, I don't know, things are just, they don't work out. And I'm lucky in my life because somehow, I don't know how I manifested this, but actually I know how, because I've always had this dream in my heart of like finding that perfect partner, and I don't believe in the fairy tale, like the Hollywood fairy tale, like there's only one person for everybody. I believe that we have many soulmates, but I've always kept alive in my heart that there is somebody out there for me that would be a long-term, happy, healthy relationship. And I've had the beautiful opportunity to witness around me long-lasting, healthy, happy relationships with many, many couples. Most of them were my clients, just people I knew. Like I got to see like these beautiful relationships, and then I also got to see ones that got together and just crashed and burned. So I happen to be really good at this topic because I myself have learned so much about myself through my crashing and burning in romantic relationships. And both of my memoirs, Fearless Freedom, Becoming Soulfire, and You Are Your Own Beloved, talk about how I learned about myself through my relationships with soulmates, and mostly I'm talking about intimate romantic relationships. And so I always thought it was interesting how it was like this phenomenon, how when you meet somebody at first, it's like this, this chemistry, and you're both on your best behavior. And, you don't start off fighting usually. It's just like, usually like, you're just getting to know somebody. So there's like this distance between you, and there's this cordial, like a little bit of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Just holding back, kind of seeing how this person is, being more considerate. I always felt like in the beginning, people were more considerate and respectful, because you didn't know that person. And then once you got to know them, it was just like, the knives came out, stabbing everyone in the back. It was just like all the worst parts of you would just come out, and it would just like crash and burn. And I always like wonder why is it like, why can't we hold on to like how it was in the beginning? And I once read this article about what, sorry, 2 traits to that you need to cultivate and keep alive in a relationship to keep it healthy and successful. And I thought it really resonated with me, and I try to really take it in and live by it. And the 2 were kindness and respect. And I thought, wow, that's so, because I feel like it's kind of like those 2 things you just throw out the window once you get to know somebody. It's like, oh yeah, and you're different to them. You're different to them than you would be to a complete stranger, right? And I always thought, wow, that's such a strange phenomenon. Like, this person can be like horrible to their mate, or yelling and screaming, or just blah, and then somebody comes along and asks them for something, and then you're just like nice to them or something. Like, I always thought, wow, that's so interesting. And yeah, so that topic, I've read a lot of books on this topic, and I've done a lot of workshops on this topic. And I think the book that helped me the most to really understand why this happens is called The Honeymoon Effect by Dr. Bruce Lipton, who is one of my favorite authors. Hey, Bruce. I read all his books. I love all his books. So enlightening. And I love him and his energy and his personality. I got to spend some time with him in Canada at the Sundance Sacred Ceremony with the First Nation Cree, and he's so down to earth and funny, kind, smart, brilliant man, and I love his books. So The Honeymoon Effect was, he says in this book, which I think it's so true, there's 4 people in the relationship, not 2, 4. It's you and your subconscious, and them and their subconscious. And if you're not aware, and you're not meditating, you're not doing the inner work, if you're not like an awakened being paying attention, then who comes to the forefront and rules the roost is your subconscious and their subconscious, and they're just like battling each other. And also Eckhart Tolle, his book The New Earth, where he talks about the pain body, that also resonated with me very much. It's like, basically, what's coming to the forefront is your pain body and their pain body. All the wounds and the traumas that haven't been healed, that are still running the show in your subconscious. And we live like 90% or maybe more by our subconscious. And our subconscious is another word for our habits. So we're not even aware. That's just what we do, how we react, what we say, that's how we live. And so if you're not also, the other author that I like, that I got a lot from, was Osho, and one of his books, I don't remember the name of it, but this one book was really just, wait, there's another book by Yogi, Amrit, Desai, also The Yoga of Relationships. That also was like an amazing book. And when I moved from New York to Hawaii, I couldn't bring all my books. I mean, it was so expensive to ship, and I did ship a bunch of them, but I mostly gave them away, and it killed me because I had a tiny studio apartment, and what I had the most in my apartment were books. I had just bookshelves and shelves of books, and I was really attached to them because I just went back to them over and over again. They just helped me a lot, and these are some of the books that really helped me when it came to trying to understand relationships, the romantic relationship. So, and Osho said, he said, like, if you and your partner are not actively meditating, most likely you're not going to have a successful, healthy relationship, because it's like challenging, right? And so we're like the wounded walking around bumping into the wounded. Our pain bodies are bumping into other pain bodies. That's what we're attracting, because like attracts like. That's the law of the universe. 100% of the time, like attracts like. So it's like the wound in me that hasn't been healed. It's like this little program, like on your computer, when you minimize something, it's still there. It's very small, but it's still there. It's still active, and it's beep. It's going out. It's like beep. This little beep, beep. The sonar radar, and then what you're attracting is beep. That other person, right? And then it's like all of a sudden your subconscious wounds and their subconscious wounds start to go to battle. At first, it's all like, oh, lovely, lovely, lovely. Like, oh yes, you have that kindness and the respect still because you haven't known each other. And as soon as you get comfortable with each other, the knives come out, and it's like, oh. So that was my story, and yeah, so I haven't really had any long-term successful romantic relationships. They always ended after maybe about a year and a half. It's funny, like, I think that's like the time where I once read that they say that the hormones shift when you go from like, oh, this like in love phase to like all of a sudden that's gone, and like you just left with like reality. And so it's interesting. So I learned about myself through these catalytic soulmate relationships, I call them, and all of these men that were coming into my life, that I had this intense, and it was like right away, it was right away, this connection, like, oh, I know you. And right from the beginning, it was like boom, and then boom. But they taught me, when I finally had enough wisdom and enough, like I had enough of having unsuccessful relationships that ended in, like, as my one astrologer used to say, Bob Cook, he said, you were born with Pluto in your chart. And he said, like, also Saturn. He said, but Pluto eats Saturn for breakfast. Like, your relationships are going to end up boom, like this massive kaboom. And he even told me, he said, but you're going to learn about yourself through your relationships. And that's exactly what I did. And I wrote about it. And it's profound, you know, and I think that I could really help people in this area. And some of my friends that talk to me and confide in me about their relationships, and I start to talk with them and maybe share some guidance, they say to me, wow, you're really good at this. You should do counseling. I'm like, yeah, I know, and I do, because I'm good at it, because I've had so much experience at learning what not to do and what actually ruins the relationship. So for me, one of the things that would happen is, so my core limiting belief that I walked around with was abandonment. And when I was in a relationship, and say, for example, they would change plans at the last minute, like we had plans together and then maybe at the last minute they decided to do something else, it would trigger me. And I'd actually feel in my body, in my gut, like that feeling of, oh my God, they're leaving me. And it was like brought back the emotional, that first time that I felt that. And it's like this fear, like, please don't leave me. And it goes back to like when I was little and I was in an orphanage and I was adopted, and the caseworker, I remember that she came to check on me with my new family, my new home in the suburbs, and she was saying goodbye and waving to me, and I was at the top of the stairs and she was at the bottom. And in my head, I was 4 years old. I remember thinking and feeling and saying in my head, don't leave me. And so like that feeling of like that abandonment, they would trigger it. And it had nothing to do with what they were doing. They just decided they wanted to do something else. And so I would react in not a good way. And all my insecurities I would dump on them, like this tsunami soul fire would just come out and be like, ah, you know. And after a while, like, who can take that? You know, who can take somebody's insecurity and anger? I mean, it's so unattractive, you know. And eventually they would walk away or run away, and I'd be like, why? How could they do that? You know, I was in denial, and it took me to the relationship that prompted me to write this book. It took me that relationship to be able to sit and work on healing myself, to really like finally understand what that was and be able to try to be better in relationships, and not saying that I am an expert. And I've had another catalytic soulmate relationship after this book, and that's why this book was written. And so, I didn't do so good. I tried, and there was times when I really did well. Like, I patted myself on the back, where I learned how to not get triggered, because that was just muscle memory, so to say. And once I healed that wound of abandonment, which, that's a whole nother teaching. How do you heal those deep-seated wounds? But once I was able to heal that wound, it wasn't a trigger for me anymore. It was like, if I'm in a relationship and they say, oh, I want to do something else, it was like, okay. I didn't feel like, oh my God, he's leaving me. It was like normal, like, okay, you're going to do something else. And again, experience is the best teacher, right? So I always say this, words don't teach, experience does. So if you learn a lesson, like, so say you're reading my book and you're meditating or reflecting, you're like, oh, I'm really going to change. I want to change this pattern or this habit about me. How are you going to change? How? The universe is going to bring you the perfect person to work it out with. You can't change just sitting there by yourself in your living room, like, And so the universe brought me another soulmate relationship when I moved to Hawaii, and it was like, okay, you say you healed this issue, let's test it out. And a lot of it came up, but I was able to notice and take that step back, which I wasn't able to do in past relationships. Instead of immediately reacting, I was able to take a breath and like come to a center and then speak about my feelings versus lashing out and just dumping all of my emotions and my fear and my insecurity and my anger out on that person. I was able to reel it in and talk to them in a sane way and just say, what I also learned, which helps, is you don't ever point the finger at somebody else. It's just explaining to somebody, this is how I feel, right? So it doesn't put them on the defense. And, because as soon as you start talking, you're like, well, you did this and you did that, people are going to get defensive and shut down. That never works. So I learned that if there is something that comes up, and, if the other person hopefully is doing their own work and has the capacity to hold the space for you and your feelings and what you're going through, then you could sit down with them and say, hey, can we talk about this thing that happened, before? Okay, well, this is what happened, this is how it made me feel. So I'm not blaming them, I'm not pointing the finger at them, and allowing yourself to speak your truth. And now, what happens a lot of times is you might not be matched with the person that is able to hold the space for your feelings, and they might not be able to handle that. So they might just say, like, I can't deal with this, and walk away, right? I had a relationship like that, and what happens is because that person is not in touch with their own feelings, they can't hold space for you. So when they walk away, what happens is now you're holding all your emotions, and then you're holding their emotions as well. It's like double whammy, and it's way too much. So that's not a healthy relationship to be in. It's only healthy when the two people are able to communicate sanely, calmly, and just speak from their heart, and without lashing out and blaming, and just being able to speak honestly. And hopefully this video is enlightening in some way for you and helpful. And I've just rambled on for almost 20 minutes, and I was really trying to make this brief, so I'm going to end right here. If you have any feedback or any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you on the next time. Aloha. The soul fire in me, I give to you. Aho. To learn more about my offerings, visit my website at igniteyoursoulfire.com. Please subscribe to my channel and comment below, my soul family. Thank you for being here on our precious planet Gaia at this time. Your light matters. You matter. You make a difference in the world by just being you. Ahuiho, until our hearts meet again. You are loved.